1. Understanding self-worth. When we talk about self-worth, many people immediately think about how others see them. Society, friends, family, and even strangers can sometimes feel like they have the power to decide our value. It is easy to fall into the habit of measuring our lives by the approval or disapproval of those around us. But in reality, your worth is not something that others can give or take away. Stoic philosophy reminds us that true value comes from within. It teaches us that the opinions of others, while sometimes useful, should not be the foundation of how we see ourselves. Instead, our focus should be on the choices we make, the principles we live by, and the effort we put into becoming better individuals. When you understand that your worth is connected to your character and your actions, you become less dependent on outside approval. This shift is not about ignoring feedback, but about learning to recognize that your deepest sense of value is something stable, unchanging, and rooted in who you are. By seeing self-worth in this way, you build a strong foundation for inner peace and a life guided by your own values. 2. The trap of external validation. In our daily lives, it's common to seek approval from others. Whether it is through compliments, recognition at work, or reactions on social media, we often feel a sense of satisfaction when others respond positively to us. This desire for validation is natural, but it can easily turn into a cycle where our happiness depends too much on outside opinions. Stoic philosophy offers a different way of thinking. It teaches us that while external approval might feel pleasant, it should not define our sense of worth. The opinions of others are outside our control, and placing too much value on them leaves us vulnerable to constant ups and downs. Think about how often we refresh a screen to check for responses, or adjust our choices based on what we believe will earn approval. Over time, this habit can lead us away from our true values. Instead of acting from a place of principle, we may find ourselves acting for applause. Stoicism encourages us to break this cycle by turning inward. It reminds us that lasting confidence comes from aligning our actions with our values, rather than chasing temporary affirmations. This shift builds stability and a deeper sense of contentment. 3. Self-worth. From within. A common mistake we make is believing that our value is something others can give us. Compliments, achievements, or recognition can feel rewarding. But Stoic philosophy reminds us that these things do not define who we are at the deepest level. According to Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, true worth is rooted in the way we live, the principles we follow, and the character we build. Self-worth, in this sense, comes from aligning our actions with virtues such as wisdom, courage, justice, and moderation. When we act with integrity, our sense of value remains steady, regardless of how others react. This creates an inner foundation that is not easily shaken by criticism or dependent on constant praise. In practical terms, this means asking ourselves honest questions. Am I making decisions that reflect fairness? Am I showing courage when faced with challenges? Am I striving to improve through reason and reflection? By focusing on these questions, we begin to measure ourselves by standards that we control, rather than outcomes that depend on others. When self-worth comes from within, it becomes stable, lasting, and deeply connected to who we truly are. Developing inner courage. When people think about courage, they often imagine big, dramatic acts. But in Stoic philosophy, courage is something much more personal and practical. It is the strength to live according to your values, even when it is difficult or uncomfortable. True courage is not only about facing danger, it is about making honest choices every day, guided by integrity rather than fear of judgment or the desire for approval. Inner courage requires us to look closely at ourselves. It means recognizing our doubts and fears but choosing not to let them control our actions. For example, it may take courage to admit a mistake, to stand by a fair decision when it is unpopular, or to stay calm when emotions are running high. These acts may not seem extraordinary, but they shape a strong and steady character. Stoicism teaches that courage also includes the willingness to reflect and change when better understanding arises. Adapting to new wisdom requires humility and bravery. By practicing this form of courage, we learn to act with clarity and consistency, regardless of external pressures. Over time, this strengthens our confidence and allows us to live more authentically. 5. Embracing vulnerability. Vulnerability is often seen as something to hide, but Stoic philosophy encourages us to approach it differently. Rather than viewing it as weakness, vulnerability can be understood as an honest acceptance of our human nature. We all experience doubts, fears, and moments of uncertainty. Recognizing this truth allows us to face life with greater clarity and honesty. In Stoicism, being vulnerable does not mean letting emotions control us. Instead, it means acknowledging them openly and responding with reason. For example, admitting when we feel uncertain or sharing our struggles with someone we trust can help us better understand ourselves. This process builds strength because it prevents us from being held back by unspoken fears. Embracing vulnerability also creates opportunities for growth. When we acknowledge our limitations, we are more willing to learn, adapt, and improve. This mindset leads to resilience because we no longer spend energy avoiding or denying difficulties. Furthermore, vulnerability can deepen our relationships. By being open about our challenges, we invite others to do the same, creating trust and understanding. In this way, Stoicism shows us that vulnerability, when paired with self-awareness, is not a weakness, but an important step toward living with integrity and balance. 6. Building resilience. Resilience is often described as the ability to recover from setbacks, but in Stoic philosophy, it carries a deeper meaning. For the Stoics, resilience is about preparing the mind to face challenges with calmness and balance, rather than reacting with frustration or despair. This strength is built by focusing on what we can control, our thoughts, actions, and choices, while accepting that many external events are beyond our influence. One Stoic practice that supports resilience is daily reflection. At the end of the day, reflecting on how we responded to situations helps us see where we acted wisely and where we can improve. This habit builds awareness and prepares us to handle future difficulties with greater clarity. Another practice is imagining possible setbacks in advance. By calmly considering what might go wrong, we reduce the shock if difficulties appear. This exercise is not about pessimism, but about readiness. When the unexpected happens, we are less shaken and more able to respond thoughtfully. Resilience in Stoicism also means holding firmly to our values, even in hard times. By focusing on courage, fairness, and wisdom, we turn obstacles into opportunities for learning and personal growth. 7. Focusing on your own path in life. It is easy to feel pressured by the expectations of society, family, or peers. Often, we may find ourselves making choices based on what others want, rather than what aligns with our own values. Stoic philosophy encourages us to step back from this pressure and focus on building a life that reflects our true principles. Focusing on your own path does not mean ignoring others or rejecting good advice. Instead, it means making sure that your actions are guided by reason and integrity, rather than fear of judgment or a desire for constant approval. When we act from our values, we develop a sense of consistency and peace that does not depend on shifting opinions. Challenges will always appear along the way. The Stoics remind us that obstacles can become opportunities for growth if we approach them with courage, fairness, and wisdom. Each challenge is a chance to practice these virtues and to strengthen our character. By committing to our own path, we also accept responsibility for our choices. This responsibility brings freedom, because we recognize that while we cannot control everything that happens, we can always choose how to respond with clarity and purpose. 8. Living authentically with Stoicism. The heart of Stoic philosophy is learning to live in a way that is true to yourself. Living authentically means that your choices, actions, and way of life reflect your values, rather than being shaped only by outside pressures. It is about finding peace in knowing that you are guided by principles such as wisdom, courage, justice, and moderation. When we live authentically, we stop chasing approval or fearing disapproval. Instead, we ask ourselves honest questions. Am I acting with fairness? Am I being thoughtful in my decisions? Am I choosing what is right over what is easy? By reflecting on these questions, we create a foundation for self-respect that does not depend on the shifting opinions of others. Stoicism also teaches that authenticity requires responsibility. While we cannot control every situation, we can control how we respond. Each response becomes a chance to practice virtue and strengthen our character. Over time, living authentically brings stability and calm. It allows us to face challenges without losing our balance and to experience life with greater clarity. By following this approach, we move closer to a life that is both meaningful for ourselves and beneficial for those around us.